Several months ago, I was using a 2012 MacBook Pro as my daily driver. It had 16 gigs of 1600 megahertz DDR3 RAM inside it and a 512 Crucial SSD inside of it as well. It was a pretty respectable machine, but in about October or September, maybe as early as September of 2019, it started to kind of crap out on me. Chrome would start to crash. Some of the functions just wouldn't work in it, and I didn't know what that was about. Apps like Excel would run pretty slowly. I may have downloaded some files and some emulators for gaming that I probably shouldn't have. So I was trying to figure out ways to boost the performance of my MacBook when I ran across this video by Snazzy Labs, and I was just like sucked in instantly. I had never heard the word Hackintosh before, but I was like completely blown away. I started to do some research into Hackintosh, and I realized that I could either A, continue holding on to my MacBook Pro 2012 that was crapping out on me. I could shell out $2,500 or $2,000 or whatever it is to buy a new MacBook Pro, or if I could deal with the fact that I'm now going to be using a desktop, I could build myself a Hackintosh for a lot less money. So I decided to take the plunge, and I started learning everything I could about Hackintosh. Found out there's this resource called Tony Mac, which I'll put the link to down below, where they have a forum where you can, get help, and they have instructions. They have entire builds that you can go through and build, and they know it's going to work for Hackintosh and things like that. They have a lot of software and things like that. So I started to delve into that, and then I started to price things out. I had two requirements for my Hack Mac, and that was it had to be reasonably priced. I was on a budget, and it had to perform better than what I was getting out of my 2012 MacBook Pro. I'll put the specs up here on the screen as well as my total cost. I actually started out buying a computer from a friend, and I was able to install Mac on it, but it was running an NVIDIA graphics card, which I later found out is not supported. So the specs of my machine went like this. I started out with the $300 machine, and inside was an EVGA NVIDIA GTX 1080 card. And I ended up selling it for $200. Then I had a motherboard, can't remember which one. Inside was a i5 2500. So I knew I didn't want that. That's the same processor that was in my MacBook Pro. And so I sold that entire combo, the motherboard, the RAM, and the CPU for $80. Then I went ahead and I bought all of the parts that I needed in addition. By the way, I don't have it on here because I didn't buy it, but it came with an Asus Wi-Fi card that does in fact work with Mac, and so that was nice. I can't remember the model. It also came with an EVGA 850 watt 80 plus certified gold, I think is what it is. So just an overkill power supply. I bought a $90 ASRock B365 Pro 4. It's usually in a micro ATX form factor, but I got mine and it was a standard ATX form factor. I also got an Intel i5 9600K. I don't need the K. It's for overclocking, and I don't need overclocking for what I'm doing, but that ran me $229. I got 16 gigs of Corsair Ballistics RAM for $66, and it's 2 sticks of 8 gigs each. So because I have 4 slots for RAM, 4 channels, I can in fact add more RAM if I'd like to. I got an all-in-one cooler from Corsair H6D. Then I got a Fantex Eclipse P300 case, some Fantex cable extenders for looks, and I got an MSI RX 580 graphics card that's used for $65. Now it's a 4 gigabyte edition, so it's not the higher end of the MSI RX 580s, but it does the job for me. And then I also got some WD Blue 250 gigabyte SSD, as well as a 500 gigabyte one so I could install Windows. So my all-in cost for the Hackintosh side of things was $688. So definitely cheaper than you're going to find most MacBook Pros. Even ones from 2015 are still running from like $800 all the way up to $1,100 used. I decided to go ahead and build this. It was definitely a pain to install Mac on it. None of the tools from Tony Mac worked for me, so I ended up having to go the route of a vanilla install, which I hear is not the way to go if you're doing your first Hack Mac. So I followed Morganaut's video, which you can see here, on how to do a vanilla install, and that worked for me. As far as benchmarks and performance go, like I said, I installed Windows 10, so I booted into that for gaming, and I'm able to run Modern Warfare at 1440p at 60 plus frames per second consistently. But I also decided to do a Geekbench test just to see how this stacked up against the other Macs that are on the market right now. And honestly, it did amazingly well. I didn't think it was going to do this well, but it hangs up there with, you know, the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro. And then I also went ahead and pulled the numbers for the model that I was running before I built my Hackintosh, and it just creams what I was doing before. So definitely really, really awesome performance from this, even with some last generation parts that are in there. So anyway, those are the specs of my computer, and it performs really, really well. It definitely does everything I need, and all of my programs work fine. There are some hangups, and that is like the onboard audio doesn't work, and I've installed other drivers, other kexts for that, and it still isn't working. The USB 3.0A doesn't seem to work on some devices, but it does on others, so I'm not so sure exactly how that works. But my front I/O works just fine, so that's how I run my audio, is out of the front I/O, which, I mean, my computer's turned sideways on my desk anyway, so it's not that big of a deal for me. The Noctua fans that are on the front came with the computer I had before. My friend was just like all for making sure everything stayed cool, so he had like 6 fans installed on that computer. It was kind of nuts, and definitely overkill. And so even the max temperature that I've ever seen this computer go to is at 77 degrees Celsius. So even then, you know, full capacity, it's not running that hot, which is really nice. The AIO cooler is working, the intake and exhaust is working pretty well on the computer, I'd say, even though the front is pretty blocked off. So the case is good, the machine works really well, it fits all of my needs, and it runs things like it's able to recognize all of my devices. AirDrop doesn't work, which is kind of a bummer, but continuity works just fine. You know, being able to have my notes on the computer and then be able to edit them on my phone and have them sync up, that works totally fine. Everything else as far as continuity goes and whatnot is great. So overall, it was a really, really awesome experience. If you can deal with the desktop experience, I definitely recommend Hackintosh. It was a lifesaver for me and definitely had some really awesome performance boosts. So I have some computer projects coming up that I'm really excited about, some really old MacBooks that you can actually probably see in the background here. Some old MacBooks that I'm working out, one from 2006. The other ones are from 2009 that I'm working on restoring and seeing if I can use and make them usable even today. So definitely like this video and subscribe for that kind of content. Hopefully I'm able to do those projects here pretty soon. And thank you so much for watching.